You know, I think 2026 goal, make more Land Rovers run. Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch. Last episode, we started the process of making the LR4 that I think Land Rover should have made. Yes, a pickup. We sliced our budget LR4 in half and mounted up a Long Ranger cab kit to the rear. But today we have a little bit of arts and crafts to do because we need to figure out what to do with everything behind the cab. But before we get into the video, we need to talk about today's sponsor, me. But no, I'm just messing. A lot of you guys have been asking where the merch store went. I took it down earlier this year because of all the chaos with buying the car wash and buying way too many Land Rovers. But it is now back up and we'll be adding stuff to it as time goes on. Speaking of buying too many projects, in addition to our Lost Cause Ranch stickers, we added a couple new ones. So if you are addicted much like me, you can now show the world. We should probably start up a class or something. And then if you love Land Rovers like I do, you are probably much of a glutton for punishment. So we also have this guy. We drive these not because it is easy, but because it is hard. That is our little riff on the JFK going to the moon speech, because what fun is a Land Rover without a little punishment? So last video, we obviously did the major work of this project and cut the LR4 in half. That was so we could fit our Long Ranger truck cab cap. Truck cab cap. Say that a few times. Truck cab cap. Truck cab cap. Shockingly, it actually fits pretty well, and even more shocking, it looks pretty freaking sweet if you ask me. But now that the back half's out of the way, the next major step is gonna be getting the body set back onto that chassis. We really don't know what to do with the back end until we can look at it. I mean, we did a bunch of measurements beforehand, but you just never know what room you're working with until it's actually in place. Need to get Chet's tennis ball out of the way too. I've had better steering wheels. Perfect. Just noticed a little bit of an issue. So our predicament is the hoist arms. When we cut the back half off this guy, we obviously lost a lot of length. We had to pull the hoist arms in to get them to fit on our single cab versus the 4-door it was before, which means the arms go further in, which also means they'll land right on top the chassis. So we can't lower it down to where it needs to be. But I think we can get away with doing a little cribbing. As long as it lands in a decent spot, kind of just block it up. And as long as we balance it right, we should be able to swing the hoist arms out of the way then. Then we'll just have to figure out getting it off the blocks and set down, but that just sounds like a future Joe problem. We're gonna tackle this one step at a time. We need more block. This couldn't possibly go bad. So this is gonna get a little hillbilly, I think. We're gonna take the weight off the front with the engine hoist and then try and get everything situated. You know what a guy really misses is my forklift. I should probably get another one. This would be much easier doing it a different way, but we're gonna work with what we got. And now that we got the front supported, we're gonna swing the rear arm out of the way, and then we're gonna switch the front arm to the back here. And this is gonna work. And we'll get our cribbing, AKA block, out of the way. And from here, it'll be a bit of a dance of lower the front, lower the rear, lower the front, lower the rear. And we just gotta make sure we don't do this in any dramatic fashion. If I had someone else here, we could do it in a pair, but we'll get it. The thing I'm most excited about setting this guy down, it'll be our first chance to look at it without the hoist in the way. We'll be able to roll it back and really see just how the cab looks. It's looking like this bottom lip of the cab is going to be a pretty tight fit. I don't know what that was. We actually had the chassis pretty well lined up. We just got about 3/4 of an inch. We need to shift it to the driver's side. I'm thinking that might be the ticket. A little more. All right, let's try and let it down. And we're in. All right, so we're off. Let this back down. We're about an inch off the front, maybe a little more. We're gonna let the air out of the rear suspension here. I don't know if you can see the massive rake that it currently has. Well, it's kind of dropping itself now in the back, but the front dumped itself through all the jockeying around. So I'm just gonna air out the rear as well, just so it sits level. As it turns out, we disconnected quite a bit of stuff on this, maybe a little bit before we can turn it on and air it back up. Kind of neat. With everything out of the way, you can see the suspension working. Man, it is freaking cool to see this thing on the ground, unobstructed, no hoist in the way. This is our first real look, and I am just smitten with the way it is looking. Although it's kind of like a mind game, it really looks like the wheelbase was shortened up. It doesn't look like there was a second door and all of an LR4 body back there. I mean, just look at a stock one. Look at how much is back there. And if we come back over to the truck, it just doesn't look anywhere near the same. It also doesn't help that we have it aired out. It's like a drift truck now, but it being aired out is really gonna help us when we move on to the next step of this build. We'll talk about that in a second, but let's just look at the fitment of the cab on everything else. When the cab was coming down onto the chassis, I was not sure that that would all clear, but they have this nicely fitted up. We aren't gonna have to do any work on either side of this guy. And when we started this project, I was also thinking that I was gonna change out this rear section of the frame. When it was aired down up front, skied in the rear, this looked like it was quite a bit higher than everything else. But now that we're looking at it, I think we can just clear out a bunch of the stuff that isn't gonna be used. We're not gonna have a spare tire underneath this one anymore because the 32-inch tires really don't fit too well in there. You have to let the air out and stuff it up. So that means we're definitely not gonna be able to have a 35-inch tire under there. Yes, with the rear body out of the way, we are gonna work ourselves towards having 35-inch tires on this guy all the way around. And we're gonna do that on the 2.5-inch lift that it had before. I don't wanna do any more lift than that because we really start messing with the suspension geometry. When you're dealing with independent suspension, and you start lifting them out of range, you start getting some really goofy camber and caster angles. You can see right now this thing is aired all the way down and this thing has a bunch of negative camber. When we do the opposite and air it all the way up, say in like extended mode, it has the opposite, which would make sense. Having the opposite effect when you're doing the opposite thing would make sense, but we end up getting some positive camber. The top of this tire tilts outward and the bottom goes in, and you start getting some goofy wear patterns like that. So we're gonna keep it at the 2.5-inch lift, and obviously, depending on what we do in the back, we'll have plenty of clearance. But up front here, we're gonna have to do some modifications, but more on that in the future. It's gonna involve more cutting, which we obviously aren't scared of. So now on to the next phase of this guy. We obviously have to do something back here. Now, I've had a few different ideas bouncing around in my head, but I wanted to get a visual with the body on the chassis. And I'm glad we waited until that point to make a decision, because let me tell you, the wheels are much closer to up here than I was envisioning in my head, but that's all right because it is going to work. So what I have wanted to do with this thing, and the whole reason and why we had this back cap shipped all the way to the US from England, an Aussie style tray back. Yes, we are doing a flatbed. We are going to do a toolbox front and rear to make up the wheel well, a nice roll bar for some protection when we're getting stupid, and then some flip down sides to give it the perfect look. You know, maybe something like this. Our longtime buddy James sent us over this little rendering and we riffed off that for ours. So big thanks to him because I'm not smart enough to do it on my own. I'm not much for AI, but holy cow, does it make envisioning something like this a little bit easier. I do think like a body matched pickup truck bed would be pretty cool. Maybe do that in the future, but I think for that to work, we would need to extend the chassis and get the rear wheels further back. Maybe a long bed LR4 is in the works. But what we're gonna end up with is a roughly 6 foot, or in the rest of the world, something less than 2 meter flatbed. Told you we were gonna make something more useful, just in quite a bit different fashion than it was before. Now, I am a visual guy, and if you've been around watching the channel at all before, you know I like to use our little CNC laser and do some CAD design. Yes, cardboard aided design. So what we're gonna do is roll this guy back into the shop. Before we pull the LR4 back into the shop, we need to do a little rearranging, play a little Tetris, because we got a neat Land Rover getting dropped off today, and shit, we're just kind of running out of room. We're gonna try and get the lightweight up here, and I think if we put it sideways up here, we'll still be able to get something on the hoist and work on it. It's the plan, at least. You know, things like this would be much easier if we had an engine in it. You know, maybe something like that. You know, I think 2026 goal, make more Land Rovers run. At least it's a lightweight, you know, not too heavy to push around. Well, that thing don't look half bad back there. Another benefit is we got all this room here, which means I think we can go buy another Land Rover. No, this is where the LR4 is going to be able to sit. That way that's inside, and we still have the hoist open for other projects. And when we're working on the LR4, we'll be able to just roll it back to give us some room. And if you think chopping one Land Rover up like that is crazy, don't worry. Just to solidify that the Freelander is the best Land Rover ever, they give you a nice foam push bar to get your broken Land Rovers moved around. Now that the Freelander got us back inside, we can start making up some templates. They're probably not going to be as nice as this rear diff cover that we made up for our little 1-ton swap on the Range Rover camper, but we went ahead and shaved that down and made a diff cover to match. But what I want to do is get a visual of what the tray back will look like. So first started roughing this guy out is to give us a little base. Just did a little plywood with some stands off the frame mounts. On another note, this is actually part of the crate that guy was in, multi-use. And what we're going to use that plywood for is get a rough shape of the actual flatbed itself. So that chunk of cardboard is dimensionally what I'm thinking for the base of the tray bed. Although I think we're going to boat tail the rear here a little bit. We're gonna do that for a couple reasons. And we're gonna take that chunk we cut off the other side, flip it over, trace that. Just so everything's all matchy-matchy. So that chunk of cardboard is roughly 70 by 71 inches. 70 inches this way, 71 inches that way. Or for you guys that use the smarter measurement system, it's something over a couple meters by something over a couple meters. But this little boat side cutout is gonna do two things. It's gonna clean up the bulkiness of what is gonna be a decent sized flatbed because we want this guy to be useful. But the real reason is, in our neck of the woods, the trails are tree lined and tight. So what we're gonna do is create a straight angle from the rear bumper bar to the tire and pretend I'm a tree. I now fit inside that area, giving us a much tighter departure angle. This whole deal is actually gonna make the LR4 much more capable on the trails we're getting rid of a bunch of stuff that can just get in the way on tight trails. Mainly the upper tall roof line. And second, we cut our corner a little bit there. And looking at this now, I think we're gonna shorten this guy up a couple inches. And this is exactly why I kind of do the arts and crafts section of the project like this. We use physical cardboard to lay something out. Cardboard is much cheaper and easier to work with than aluminum. If I were to do this and do it wrong in aluminum, we're blowing hundreds of dollars. Instead, I'm just cutting up stuff that's going to get recycled anyways and getting a nice visual. Now you got to remember, this is not exactly how it's all going to turn out, but it is giving us a rough idea. Just like our little AI rendering did earlier, that gave us a direction to go. And AI is actually pretty neat in projects like this. I'm not smart enough to render something. I mean, who am I kidding? I'm not even actually smart enough to AI render stuff, as you can see by my first attempt. That was kind of an odd looking tray back LR4. But from this point, we got to do the fun stuff with the cardboard. We're going to measure our gap here. So we'll do 19 by roughly 22. Remember that. Now here comes the fun part of our CAD work. The little Boss laser. This is a Boss 1630, which means we can cut 16 inches by 30 inches. And these guys are what you see people typically using for like making stuff for Etsy, engraving wood, leather for hats, and anything like that. But we got this for one specific purpose. This is our oddball reason for having the laser. We can draw up and visualize the piece before we waste our time cutting it out of metal. So we have a little CNC plasma over here. I've had some sort of CNC plasma for the past 15, 20 years. We started out with a 4x4, had a 5x12, and I'm back down to a little 3x4 because it fits well in my mini machine shop. But I do a ton of cardboard templates with our little laser. That way we can do proof of concept quickly, easily, and if our drawn file works, we go spit it out on that guy. We got a few more of these to bust through. It's a good thing I used to like to play with Legos. Well, I say used to, but I still like to play with Legos because now we have a little assembly to do with our improvised box. Looks like I ran over my box. Chet is thoroughly intrigued. This is like clay modeling for people who are less artistic, like myself. But that guy is gonna go pretty much something like that. We're gonna wedge this guy up with some cardboard. I think that may help. Maybe a little tape to help. So what do you guys think? So my measurements didn't translate the way I was thinking, but I think that's because it is sagging the cardboard down. This box would actually sit up probably an inch higher, because the problem right now is if we do a larger tire, we're definitely gonna run into some clearance. So I'm thinking, my thoughts are, when I was measuring it out, is that sits something like that, which gives us quite a bit of room back there. But ultimately, we're probably gonna have to shorten this guy up anyways, because it's not quite enough clearance with the cab. But like I said, that's gonna be a toolbox. This is gonna have a door that opens, be weatherproof, and we'll be able to throw bits and bobs in there. Mainly I'm thinking like recovery gear, straps, and things like that. But I'm really liking how that's building out the wheel well. All right, now that we got the front box out of the way, we need to come back over to the laser and start working on what we're gonna do for behind the wheel. See, not only can we cut the cardboard, we can do some neat stuff like that. Went a little deep on the setting, so we got a little different shape on the rear. If we squared it off, we'd lose a lot of our departure angle. But like I said, these are gonna be like side-mounted toolboxes. We're gonna make them weather tight. That's gonna require a lot of bent metal and everything, which leads us to this guy. Those of you who have been around the channel know this has been a pain in my butt, but we bought this guy new. This is a CNC press brake, and this project, or our cab pickup truck projects, was the main reason for getting this. So hopefully this paperweight now starts to work, and hopefully the project turns out, because we sunk a lot of resources into this whole guy. Now that really fills this guy out. It's starting to be a little bit like McDonald's. I'm loving it. So this is generally what I had in my head when this whole project started. What we're gonna do though is roll this guy back outside, because you and I need to stand back and look at it. Now you guys have an idea what was bouncing around in my head, and I am just stoked. This gives us all the motivation we need to keep going on this. I just freaking love it. One thing we need to take into consideration while looking at this is the side profile of the flatbed is going to be much chunkier. It'll be thicker. The frame of the flatbed itself will probably be like 2x2 aluminum square tube. So on the side here, we'll have a 2-inch tall chunk, which will fill out the look much, much more. But this whole exercise was to get a visual on the length and the wheel well toolbox look. And I think this is nailing it. Like I said, inside we need to give ourselves a little extra room to clear the bigger tire. But this is the benefit of having it completely aired out. This is as high as that tire will ever be. So we can have it pretty much touching in that area, or touching a 35 when we put that on, and not run into any issues. This now, I think we're gonna shorten up the back some and maybe rework the rear bumper bar a little bit. The wind's not really helping the situation. It's a pretty light duty flatbed at the moment. Also not very weatherproof, more like indoor use only. But in addition to what we got going on here, we will do a probably square tube, maybe round, but I'm thinking a square tube roll bar that matches the cab, and add a bunch of armor up front too. We're gonna build some rock sliders and everything, because we do need to protect the fiberglass cab. Downfall of fiberglass, you run it into something, it breaks. So we're gonna capture that in, and we wanna add a little bit of structural integrity back into the rear of that cab. Then I think we'll either build some flip down sides or maybe just some removable ones. It'll have to be in 5 pieces. We'll have a tailgate. The tailgate will probably be a drop down one. Then each side will have to have 2, and that will break out our bend here. We'll have 1 there, 1 there. It just still looks so freaking short. I just can't get over that. But let me know what you guys think down below. Are we heading in the right direction? Like I said, I want to do an Aussie style ute, put a little US spin on it. Most don't have this little boat tail cut, but mine does. With removable sides, this little cutout is not going to hinder our hauling capacity a ton, because worst case scenario, it can just overhang in this area. It will help our off-road capability massively. And to be honest, if we need to haul a lot, we have a trailer, and even better yet, we have quite the large bed on the 6-wheeler. But now we can move forward. We can run down to our local steel shop and pick up a boatload of aluminum. The bed surface itself is going to be diamond plate with the tube structure underneath. We're going to capture the factory cab mounts on the chassis to mount this guy. I think on the toolboxes, I'll do flat sheet, non-tread plate. I just don't know if I want the tread plate throughout the whole thing. If we could get our hands on checkered plate, easier here in the States, I would do that. But now that we got our template, we can draw everything up. We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna use that CNC press brake, make us some nice weather tight boxes. One thing I did forget is this side, the box will have to be modified to accommodate our fill neck, which I actually, to be honest, think I might sink into the side toolbox, keep it hidden, keep it safe. But man, giving yourself a good visual gets you motivated to move on to the next step. We're gonna go pick our aluminum up, and I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you subscribing, and I appreciate you following along to our little ute project. I'm having fun with this one. So we will catch you on the next one. We'll probably take a week off on this guy, because that is right, we have some fun stuff. That is a 6.2 liter swapped Discovery 2. It needs the exhaust toned down just a touch, So we're gonna build it a whole new stainless system. So we'll probably see you guys with that one next week. I just freaking love it. And for the few of you that were worried about everything flexing when we cut it, sunroof fit right back in. Shocker. No, I'm just messing with you.